Hello all, welcome back to our course on digital accessibility, and today we will discuss a very interesting topic which is called affordances. Those of you who have studied design probably are familiar with this word, and we will also try to understand their role in access. So, let us begin with the origin of affordances. So, originally it was proposed by a psychologist named James Gibson in the 1970s to denote action possibilities provided to the actor by the environment. In the late 1980s, popular designer called Don Norman, I am sure you might all have heard his name. He is a pioneering design thinker, and his book, which is called Design of Everyday Things, is quite a popular book and very readable. If you have not heard of it or if you have not read this book, please, I recommend you to read it. So, in the late 80s, Don Norman took advantage of Gibson's idea about action possibilities provided by the actor, provided to the actor by the environment, and suggested that these can be called as affordances and can be taken advantage of in design. So, what is the meaning of that? When we say that the actor or the user gets cues about how to act or how to react, how to use a product by the product itself, that is something which is called an affordance. So, as a designer, if we can build in these affordances or call for action in the product design itself, then it makes the life of the user very easy, because those call to action aspects are very much visible and they can interact with the call to action aspects of the product in a very easy way, and thus increasing the usability or accessibility of the product. So, if for instance, you would like to take an example, if we look at a door latch, we immediately understand how to operate it, right. So, just by looking at the handle, you can understand that it is supposed to be pulled or pushed down or depending on that. So, basically the handles which are shaped like this, they are meant to be pushed down. Handles which are shaped like this, they are supposed to be grabbed and pulled. Right. So, this is that the by design itself, the product is telling the user how to interact with me. So, this aspect Don Norman suggested in his books and his theory, that this can very well be used by designers in order to make products more usable and more interactive. So, this is strongly resonated with the designers concerned about making possible uses of their products immediately obvious, right. So, these cues, if they are built in the design, then it is obvious just by looking at the product to the user how to interact with it, and thus it saves time, flattens the learnability curve to a great extent, also helps in adaptability, easy adaptability of the new product or technology for the user. So, handles etc., some of the easy examples, but we will also in later part of this session, we will also talk about how digital accessibility and the aspects of digital accessibility use affordances in order to make themselves more affordable, more accessible. Soon the concept came to play a central role in interaction design and human computer interaction, and we learn how it happened and in what aspects it can enhance accessibility. So, Norman's affordances actually what it means is that the perceived properties that may not actually exist, right. So, what it means that the properties are basically affordances are properties which are visible or perceivable by the user, but may or may not actually exist. This part we will discuss further. What is the meaning of actually existing or not existing, but at least it is perceivable, right? Suggestions or clues as to how to use those properties. Norman's affordances can be dependent on the experience, knowledge or culture of the actor. So, we as designers can also take inspiration or clues from the existing cultural or knowledge or experience or familiarity of our user themselves in order to take advantage of affordances. So, just another example in this case. So, for example, in Indian culture, we know that the color red is considered as very happy or very festive color, etc., right. However, on the other hand, in Western cultures, it is considered as a dangerous or the color of a demon, etc. Right. So, then that is why if you see all of the affordances related to closing or negativity or wrong, tick marks are always color coded in green, wrong answer is always color coded in red. So, there is a very strong cultural correlation behind this, and the designers of those software applications made use of it very nicely. So, this use of affordances can make an action either very difficult or very easy. So, how it can make it difficult, that also we will discuss in further slides. Of course, how it makes an action easy, that we are trying to understand somehow, that it helps us to understand how the product is supposed to be used just by looking at it. So, that is why it makes it easy. So, why do we need to use affordances? So, good designs are always intuitive. What is the meaning of intuitive? Intuitive means that you are drawing, as a designer, you are drawing on the intuition of human behavior, you are drawing on the natural instincts of humans, so that an understanding the psychological aspects, the cultural aspects, what they like, what they dislike, what they find familiar, what they like to do, what is easy for them, and then tailoring it into your design in order to make it intuitive or just making it obvious to use, right. So, that is something which is what is the meaning of intuitive. So, let us again take an example. So, if we look at this image, what do you think this is? So, this is a image of a stereoscope designed in the 19th century. None of us might have actually seen this product in reality, but if you are handed over this product today, will you be able to understand how to use it? Can you guess? Probably yes, right. It looks like a VR headset, it needs to be placed in this part, it has two holes, something to be looked at for the two eyes. So, basically you hold the handle, there is one handle, you hold it like this and you hold it in front of your eyes. So, it covers your eyes like this. So, the design itself is able to tell you that this is how it is supposed to use, even though you do not know what a stereoscope does, even though you do not even know how to actually what to look for once you are inside it, you do not know who was Holmes, you are not living in the 20th century, in fact, we are alive almost 200-300 years after this product was invented. But this is the beauty of affordances, because they are catering to the natural human instincts, and that is why human instincts don't suddenly change in 2 years. So, that is why we are able to, just by looking at the picture, plus by looking at the product, we are able to understand how to use it. So, similarly, as I said, it looks similar to a VR headset of the 21st century, which is almost born after 200-250 years after this product. And they also are using similar affordances, and just by looking at the design, you know how to wear it, you know how to put it on, you know what to do with it. So, the summary is that affordances appeal to innate human understandings. So, this is another example of a very interesting doorknob actually. So, it is like as if there is a person trying to shake hands with you, but it is almost funny, right. So, let us try to understand what are affordances and what are the different types of affordances, and how it can make users' life easy or difficult. So, affordances are properties of objects which show users the action they can take in order to interact with it. And users should be able to perceive affordances without having to consider how to use the items. Right? So, make sure that you emphasize on the word perceive. Why we are using perceive and not see again and again? Because the word perceive caters to a multimodality interaction. Perception is valid for an audio perception, a video perception, or other sensorial perceptions. However, when you say see, it is just visual. Right? So, the word perceive is a bit broader, and that is why we are saying it may be sometimes visual cues, it may be sometimes audio cues as well, it may be tactile cues, it may be some olfactory cues, which olfactory or like smell related cues, which invite you in some way, so that you are able to navigate and find a so and so restaurant inside some specific crowded gully. So, all of those are related to perception, and that is why we are using the term perceive and not see. Now, coming to the types of affordances. So, the first is perceivable, the second is hidden, and the third is false. So, let us one by one try to understand what is the meaning of each. So, perceivable affordance is something which the user can perceive, see or hear or whatever modality is engaging, but they are able to sense it, right. They are able to perceive it, and it is also directing them to an apt action. Hidden affordances are that there is an affordance, there is a cue, but it is not perceivable directly, it is not perceivable without any effort, it is not perceivable just by itself, right. So, it may be hidden. So, we will take some examples of hidden as well. And then there are false affordances. False affordance means that there is a perceivable affordance, but then it is directing to you an incorrect action. So, just by looking at it, you may feel that this is how I am supposed to interact with it, but the moment you do, it is actually leading to a incorrect action. So, then that falls in the category of false affordance. So, let us try to understand perceivable versus hidden affordances first. So, then just if you look around, there are a lot of cleverly and intuitively designed things around us. So, such as a car door handle, and I like to give this example in my class as well, which we know just without even thinking how to use it, right. Even if we are encountering that particular car handle for the first time. So, roughly they all look like this, right? It may be very different design wise, form wise, shape wise, but just by looking at it we know how to use it. But however, have you seen this? Do you know which car it belongs to? It belongs to a Tesla, and several of their models have these handles. Just by looking at it, do you know how to use it? How the gate will open? Probably not. So, basically you need to press with one thumb. So, then the other long part of the handle comes out and then you pull it. So, you press and you pull, everything is done at the same time. But just by looking at it, it is not easy to understand. One may go and try to just push it like a button with the finger. Well, I tried to do it when I interacted with a Tesla for the first time. So, and then there are these, for a very expensive car, there are these 200 rupee handles which are available on Amazon, just to make it look like a perceivable affordance from a hidden to, just to make it change it from a hidden to a perceivable affordance, right. So, this is just funny that you buy a premium car and then you put these stupid plastic handles just to make the hidden affordance into a perceived affordance. Otherwise, people are not able to understand how to interact with it. And in colder places, if there is frost, etc., these handles, they freeze in place because there is a sheet of ice which covers, and then it is impossible for people to open because almost it gets stuck. And in a lot of Western countries, that is the case, that they have a lot of snow, etc., every year. So, then they redesigned after they saw a lot of complaints from the users, then they redesigned it, and then the further models. So, as soon as the user would approach the car, it would automatically kind of come out, right. So, that kind of changed its affordance from a hidden to a perceivable affordance, without disturbing the aesthetic quality of the car which they wanted to have. However, with these electronically modified doors, with model S, there has been a case where the handles did not open, and the person inside kind of got stuck and faced his own death because of this. So, and there was a lawsuit against Tesla for this, and handles played an important part. So, just to understand, a good affordance means more invitation to action. Good form, it looks nice, this one, it looks nice, looks sleek, looks so finished. This one looks a little bit more jutted out, and there is this kind of cavity there, which disturbs the overall skin of the car itself. But then this is a bad affordance because there is less invitation to action. Then let us go on to understand an example of false affordance. So, if you just look at this image, so there are these buttons, or these are LED lights, and then there are buttons which needs to be pressed. These are buttons, for example, and then they have placed it, 3 is here, 4 is here, 5 is here, 6 is here, right. So, if they wanted to what happened was, the Democratic Party is listed second on the left, but in order of vote one should press the third button. So, this is just the signifier. So, we will also discuss what is the meaning of a signifier. So, basically this is just a labeling, right, in this case, and these are the feedback lights. So, like how we have in our electronic voting machines, that you press the button and then in front of the name the light blinks. So, here apparently they have this list and the light here, and the buttons are somewhere else, which is another parallel set of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, one needs to go here and see the number and then press the button accordingly. However, just by looking at this list, it seems that first is Republican, second is Democrat. And pressing the second button would cast a vote to the Reform Party, this one. But a lot of people who wanted to go with the Democratic Party, they mistakenly pressed the second button and voted for the Reform Party instead. And this is actually documented in a paper. I am not citing anecdotal issues. This is there documented in a paper where they argue that the design of this butterfly ballot during the 2000 US presidential elections may have tipped the balance of the whole election itself, just because the design, the affordances are false. So, here what we understand is that it is a call to action for the wrong action, right. So, then it is a false afford. Some more examples, very interesting examples. Which button is for which? If I want, so these are elevator buttons, that is pretty clear. I want to go up, which one do I press? And I want to go down, which one do I press? Up ke liye this one or this one? Is there any way to know? I don't think so. This is really funny. Then now here is a very common occurrence which we see in a lot of places. So, there is so just the handle itself, because it is a grabbable thing, it is supposed to be grabbed and pulled, similar to the car handles that we saw. Just by its quality of it being held and that shape itself, and similar to how all of these car or most of the doors also have. The moment you see a door handle which is jutting out, which is a handle, you try to pull it. However, in this case you can see that it is a push door. If it is a push door, then actually there is no need for a handle, because then you can push, right, just with your hands, you need to push it. So, here what is happening is that the signifier or the labeling of the action says something else. However, the affordance is inviting you to do something else, which becomes very confusing for the audience or for the user. So, whether if you approach such a door, would you pull it or push it? Because grabbing and pushing is not an intuitive action. When you grab, you can pull, or if you want to pull, you need to grab it, otherwise you cannot pull. If there is no handle, by default you will push only. So, but then this confusing affordances are found in a lot of places. Let us now that we have some idea what is the meaning of an affordance and how it can help in making your design more intuitive, what is the meaning of perceivable, what is the meaning of hidden, what is the meaning of false affordance. Let us try to understand how it is used in digital design. So, for designers of interactive technologies, the concept signifies the promise of exploiting the power of perception in order to make everyday things more intuitive and in general more usable and thus more accessible to a variety of users. User interface designers can more freely and easily define visual properties of the objects they create. So, therefore, they appear to be particularly well positioned for providing what Norman calls strong visual cues to the operation of things. So, just if we take an example, like something like a color contrast, which is also we have discussed as one of the major WCAG criterion for making a website accessible. So, contrast of a text or a button against a background is quite important. If it is not as contrasting, you may not be able to identify it as a button, for example, or may not be able to read the text itself. Other such examples can be user interface elements which directly suggest usable actions. So, just by looking at this image, just by interface, few things are we are able to understand. This different colored box is an empty field, we need to fill something in it, username, password. This is an embossed button which is also highlighted. It is a pressable button. So, think about it, all of this is happening on a flat screen. So, all of this are physical tangible traits of indicating like depth, indicating as if it is an embossed. So, we are so designers of user interactions and user interfaces are just using visual cues. So, like using shadows, using highlights, using color contrast, just to make it look as if it is embossed, just to make it look as if it is empty. It is a box which is empty, right, like this one, something which is an embossed like a button, right. And then like this is like a contrast plus the underlying underline also indicates a hyperlink, which is a common familiar concept with most of the users, that if the text is underlined, it is also a link, right. Also the color contrast highlights it. Similarly, just by looking at this interface, again a digital screen based interface, but just by looking at it, it again draws from analog versions of volume or music equalizers and all of those things which have those small stubs which move up and down or slide left or right. Just by looking at it, you know that it is meant for sliding left or right on a scale. Clickable tabs, this is also something I am sure you all might have seen, those tab files where there are several tabs in each sections, and this is what initially the user interface designers borrowed the idea again from the familiar intuitive surroundings of their users, that okay, if when you were using physical files, they also had these tabs in each file, and the file was kept in a folder which was kept in a drawer. So, all of those terminologies, if you think, they are all coming. So, Windows has like a desktop similar to how you would have a real desk with a top where you would keep some important parts, and most of the other unimportant or non-priority files would be stashed in another drawer or in another folder. Similarly, they have borrowed this idea of tabs, and just by looking at it, you know that if I click this tab, I will move to, it will start visually showing me that information. Then this swipeable touch screen slider, again just by looking at it, it also has this gliding glow, which also kind of indicates that okay, slide. It also has a signifier. So, it says slide to unlock as well. It also has an arrow which is also considered a logo based signifier, and also just by looking at it, you know that it is an invited call to action. Then there can be pressable buttons or spinnable controls. So, this is again an early example of a digital calendar which is borrowing from your old standard calendar which people used to keep, which would has these rotating date rings, so you would rotate and then there's a date and then there's a month and then there's a year kind of a thing, and it's just they've borrowed it in the same and added visual cues like shadow, etc., to make it look as if it is like a cylinder and it is spinnable. So just by looking at it, you know that it is supposed to be scrolled and it will spin and it will change. Similarly, these are some more examples of buttons, possible buttons. So a visual designer or user interface designer can make the button like this itself, where there is no outline, where there is no gradient, there is no nothing really, it's just the text, because the code by default doesn't need that. But if we want the users to interact with it, if we want the users to, so this is just the signifier. This is signifier plus hidden affordance maybe, or less perceivable. This can be a hidden affordance because it may be a button, but just by looking at it you don't know. This is a low perceivability affordance, and with all of these other aspects, with the signifier plus high perceivability affordance, just by looking at it you know that if I press this button it will submit whatever you want to submit. So it's like basically a scale, right? So few affordances and many affordances. So as we move from here to here, so it can vary from this to that, but as designers we can take a call where it needs to be a lot of affordances if it is something which is a necessary top priority action in your interface. You want the user to look at it, you want the attention to go towards that button, then you want many affordances. What is, where can you think of instances or examples where designers or companies use fewer affordances, but consciously use fewer affordances? So do you know, like when all of these, do you remember when all of these ads pop up, they have this very small cross button which is like stashed in one little corner. The visibility is also very low, it was also always merging in the background. It is very thin line, so small that you cannot press it with your thumb. So they are intentionally using those fewer affordances. So you are not able to close it and you are forced to watch that ad, right? So this is how they can make use of fewer affordances also, if they want you to make, if they want to force you to do something which you don't want to do also. And they can make you want to do things which is necessary or important to do in the whole part of the interaction or the process, just by adding affordance, or by removing affordance they can make you do things which you don't want to do as well. So just by looking at this picture, you may feel that these are actually buttons. However, they are not, they are just indicating the sale price. So then it is a false affordance because it is looking exactly like a button. So this is a kind of study which or this kind of a palette which user interface designers probably create before they start coding or designing an interface. So basically how a button or default state would look, primary or important buttons would look like this. Highlight as soon as you if you want to highlight something, then how it looks. If it is an alert button, then how it will look. So and also different aspects of it. So if you, this is the default state, if you hover then it becomes darker, then if it is disabled, it becomes lighter. If there is some loading text, then it is becoming like this. If you want to click or focus, then it becomes even darker and seems as if it is pressed inside. So, this table can help you understand the relationship between perceptual information and an affordance. So, so if there is no affordance and there is no perceptual information, then it is a correct rejection. If there is an affordance, but there is no information, then it is a false affordance. It is a false affordance. If there is no affordance and there is a perceptual information, then it is a hidden affordance. And if there is an affordance and there is perceptual information, then it is perceptible affordance. So, why do we need affordances? Again, for error prevention, maintain accuracy and overall enhancement of the user experience. So, to summarize, we spoke about affordances, the conceptual part of it, different types, uses, and how we can incorporate it in our design and our thought process as well. To know more and understand the various aspects and how our day-to-day objects or day-to-day technologies have used affordances in order to make our lives so simple and easy, you can go through this book, The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman, and it is a very interesting read. I really recommend this book. See you in the next class. Thank you for sticking around with Digital Accessibility.